Okay, today we're going to be learning Yoma Daf Kafeh. Today's daf is sponsored by Ruth Leah Kahan, Jessica Shklar, and Emily Michelson in memory of their mother, Kadima Bat Harav Avram Tzvi Ben Sion V'chaya, on her third Yurtzeit, and by Robin Bodek Rosenbaum to mark the 11th Yurtzeit of her father, Rav Reuven Ben Tzvi Hirsch Reuven Bodek, a prince of a man who was loved by all who knew him. He is sorely missed. Okay, just a small announcement before the pictures that I've been using. So I don't always bring them up on the video, but they are found on our website. So they're from the portal Daf Yomi, but there's a link on our site every day. On today's daf post, you can find both a button that leads you to the study guide, which I always make references to, and the button that leads to the pictures. Okay, there's a button right underneath where it has the summary of the daf and the links and all that, the podcast and the YouTube. So for those who don't always use the site, you can use the site, right? If you're listening by podcast and you don't ever go on the site has all the extra materials. So that's helpful. Like today, for example, there's a few pictures. You can use them and see a few of the things that we're discussing. Okay, there's not always pictures, and the study guide is usually once in a while there isn't. So if you look one day and you don't see it, that's because once in a while there aren't pictures or there aren't necessarily study guides. But today there's a study guide and pictures, so you can look there. I'm going to start now from the bottom as a quick review of yesterday's daf. We had a machloka between Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshet about what clothing are the Kohanim wearing when they do a payis, when they stand up for the lottery. What are they wearing? So we saw Rav Nachman said regular clothing, because he said we're worried that somebody might lose and they're going to be so excited. They're going to bully someone else, and say, listen, I know I lost, but I'm stronger and I'm going to get there first. And he's going to rush and do the avoda before anyone else has a chance. And if he's not wearing the proper clothes, then of course he can't do that. So this is a way of slowing him down. Rav Sheshet says, no, they wore sanctified clothes also for psychological behavioral reasons, which is because it could be that you'll win the lottery and then you'll say, oh, I'm so excited. And I go run and do the avoda, and you're going to forget that you're not wearing the right clothes. Right? It's like running out of the house and you're not fully dressed or something, right? But they are dressed. So you could see that they might just get confused and forget that they're not wearing the clothes for the priest, and therefore better that they do it in the sanctified clothing. Today, we're going to start with where does each one get it from? What we're going to have is a very easy structure. Rav Nachman is going to bring a proof. Rav Sheshet's going to explain why he doesn't think that that's a proof. Rav Sheshet's going to bring a proof, and Rav Nachman's going to explain why he doesn't think that that's a good proof. And then we're going to derive two other halachot from the source that Rav Sheshet brings, which is totally disconnected. It's just since he brought this source, we're going to learn two other things from it. That's going to take us to the next mission. So let's start from the bottom of Kaf Daled Amud Bet. Amar Rav Nachman, Mina Aminala. Where do I get it from? Ditnan, Misarun lechazanim. After the lottery's done, they pass off the Kohanim to these people called the Chazanim. What was the job of the Chazanim? They weren't like a Chazan you would have in a shul. They would help them get undressed. Now, we'll have to see in a minute, what are they getting undressed from and for what purpose? Now, this is obviously for tzniut reasons, right? They didn't get them undressed entirely. They would leave their pants on. That was the one thing they left on. So why does Rav Nachman bring this as a proof that they were wearing big day chol? Because my lav ba'otan shezachu lapayis. Who's getting undressed here? Right? There's two options. It's either the ones who came ready in their big day kihuna, their priestly clothing, and now we have to take them off, or it's the people who won and now have to take off their regular clothes, which is what Rav Nachman's going to say, in order to get dressed. So we're not sure who it is. We'll see. So Rav Nachman assumes it's the people who won. Now they have to take off their clothes and put on the priestly clothes. And then what would they do? They would take off all their clothes, leave the pants on, put on all the big day kuna on top, like the ketonet, the robe, right? Now, once you're wearing a robe, you can, the tunic, you can take off the pants because you're covered up, right? Remember, they're in the azara, it's not like there was a changing room really. So now they say it must be that, which shows why are they taking off their clothes? Because they were wearing this unsanctified clothes and now they have to get dressed in their priestly garments. Amar Rav Huna bar Yehuda, Amar Rav Sheshet, but he rejects, right? It's not exactly Rav Sheshet who rejects it, but he says Rav Sheshet, or he actually says it in the name of Rav Sheshet. I guess it was. So Rav Huna passes down in the name of Rav Sheshet, that had a Rav Sheshet read that source. Lo, ba'otan shelo zachu lapayis. We're talking about the ones who didn't win. And you can maybe remember, you must have if you remembered something we learned a few days ago, you'll understand why he has to say this. If you, as I was explaining, you might have thought there's a bit of a problem in Rav Nachman's description. We'll see that in a minute. But he says it's the people who didn't win. They now take off, they got dressed in their priestly garments. Now they don't need it because they're not going to have a job. Hachinami mistaber, and it makes the most sense to say that. If you think it's only the people who won the lottery, wait, they would leave again. What did I say the order is? They take off all the outer clothing, leave on their regular everyday pants, put on the priestly clothes, take off the pants after at the end, and put the pants on last. Now, if you remember, what did we learn? There's a very special order to how he gets dressed. The first thing he has to put on is the pants. So here it ends up being the last thing he puts on. That can't possibly be. How do we know this? Talmud Lamar, remember they said, why al basaro? It means the first thing that touches his skin is the pants. Okay, that's the first thing he has to put on. V'idach, what's Rav Nachman going to say to that then? How could he possibly explain it the way he explained it? It makes no sense. Halo kasha, oh, don't worry, that's not a question. He reads it a little bit differently than we did. Hachi katani, this is how it reads. Okay, I'm thinking about once in a while you're in some place and you have to get dressed or change something and there's people around, so you can do it in a particular way where you're just very careful that nobody can see anything, right? You slip them off, you put them on, right? Or maybe like your kids getting dressed by, the pool or something. I don't know, you're trying to like switch clothes without anybody seeing. So what would you do? You leave all the clothes on and you just take off your regular pants. Then he puts on the michnasei kehuna, and then comes in this line. Below hayu menichim aleim el michnasayim bilvad, meaning the holy michnasayim they would leave on. In other words, they put those on first. Then they take off all their other regular clothes, and then, right, what's on their body still though? When they take off all their regular clothes, they're still wearing the sanctified pants that they put on first. That's how Rav Nachman reads the source. So each one reads it his own way, and that will affect whether you think they were wearing sanctified clothes or big day chol, non-sanctified clothes when they did the lottery. Now we're going to see Rav Sheshet. Amar Rav Sheshet, mina min ala. What's my proof? Titania, as it says in a Braita, Lishkata Gazit. Okay, this is the place. It's called the Chamber of Hewn Stone, which you can find on your map on the northern side. When you walk in from the east, it's right near the entranceway on the northern side. So you walk in, make a right. Lishkata Gazit Kimim Baziliki Gdola Haita. It was like a basilica, okay, like a big, tall room. Payis B'Mizracha Zaken Yoshe B'Ma'arava. They would do the lottery on the eastern side of that room, and the elderly people would sit on the Ma'arava. That's the Sanhedrin. Now we're going to have a description, how exactly the lottery worked, a partial description. The Kohanim stand in a big circle. Remember Buchliar, we saw that. It's like a choker necklace. That's one of the explanations. So the one in charge, he takes off the turban of the headpiece of one of the Kohanim. Now already that's his proof. What if they're standing for the lottery, what's he doing with the mitznefet if he's not wearing the mitznefet of the clothing of the Kohen? So there you see, they're already dressed in their clothes. So we could have stopped here, but let's just talk for a minute about this mitznefet. Why does he take off the mitznefet? So it seems that he had this mitznefet on, they take it off. Now they want to know, let's see inside. It's kind of like a big show, right? You pull off the hat, everybody sees, pull off the turban, and everybody sees, oh, we're starting from here. It makes it very clear, right? It's arbitrary who he starts from, but he picks one person, takes off his turban and says, this is where we're starting to count from. According to the Rambam, I believe it's the Rambam, I hope I'm remembering correctly, he says, we start with him, we leave his turban off the entire time we do the payas until we're finished. Why? The point of doing this is that in case somebody starts to complain, right? Think about elections, right? Oh, the elections were rigged and they miscounted and all that. Same thing in the temple, right? Somebody claims there was a miscount, we start from the beginning and do it again. And then we know exactly who we started from. There can't be a debate because there's only one person without a turban on his head and we know we started with him. So that's a good solution. But other people say, what are you talking about? You can't be without your hair covered. Can't be, we left his turban off the whole time. It was just a sign, we're starting from here. And then they would obviously cover his head right away. It's an interesting machloket. just a side point. Now we say, again, Isal Kadata, Bibig Dechol, Mitznefet, Bibig Dechol Mi'ikat. They didn't wear a mitznefet with their regular everyday clothing. It's only part of the priestly Kohen Gadol clothes. So they say, no, in fact, there is such a thing of mitznefet b'big dechol, or not with these priestly garments. Keditane Rav Yehuda, I'm saying it like that because it's a little in between. It's sort of a priestly garment, but not exactly. Keditane Rav Yehuda v'yitem Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. Kohen shastalo imo ketonet, if his mother made him his own tunic, okay, and it would be the same for mitznefet, oved ba'avodat yachid. If you remember, we had a whole discussion a long time ago about how things that people use in the temple or wear in the temple have to belong to the public. So if his mother made him something and it's his own and not belonging to the temple, he can't use it for communal activities. Now, what we're discussing here are Bigdei Kodesh for the communal activities, because we're doing the lottery for the Korban Tamid and the everyday activities in the temple. So for that, he can't wear his own private mitznefet. So it could be he was wearing a mitznefet, his own private one, but it's still considered Bigdei Chol because it's not the sanctified clothes with which he does the general communal activities in the temple. So therefore, again, each one brought a proof and each one explained how we can understand the other one's source to be right, to go with his approach. Amar Abaye. And now, as I told you before, we're going to derive two things from the source that Rav Sheshet brought, totally disconnected, but if we're already learning this, we're going to learn something from it. Shema mina. You can infer from here. Here, there's a picture of it. If you want to look in the pictures, the Lishkat HaGazit was partially in the sanctified area and partially in the unsanctified area. Remember, we talked about this before. We saw this with the Beit HaMokeh. Remember the paspasim in the middle, those little stumps in the middle that's separated between the Kodesh and the Chol. They had these rooms that were right on the wall of the Azara, and part of it was considered outside and part of it was considered inside. And again, part of it was holy, part of it wasn't, which affects all sorts of things. But being in a holy space, we'll see. One of the things is you're not allowed to sit in the Azara. So if you're in the sanctified part, you can't sit. If you're in the unsanctified part, you can't. Kodesh Kodshim can be eaten only in the Kodesh, only in the Azara. So if you're in the whole side of the room, you can't be eating it. If you're in the Kodesh side, you can. It's kind of, you think about these kids who share rooms and they put a piece of tape in the middle of the room, you know, that's your side, this is my side. It's kind of like that. So he says, Lishkat HaGazit was half-half. You can infer that from this source. Ushma mina, and a second thing you can learn, and we're going to see in a minute how he learns these things. Shnei ptachim ayula, echad patuach b'kodesh, ve'echad patuach l'chol. There were two entrances to that room. One, you could get in from the outside and you could get in from the inside. How do we learn this? If you thought the whole thing was in the Azara, remember the Sanhedrin sat in the Lishkat HaGazit. So the Zkenim yashvu b'ma'arava, they sat on the western side of the room, but you can't sit in the Azara. So it must have been, it was on the west, you know, more toward the north in this whole section. The only people who can sit in the Azara are the kings from the Davidic dynasty. In fact, the Yerushalmi says even kings couldn't sit in the Azara. And if you think the whole thing was in the Chol, based on that, Payas b'mizracha, you can't have the Payas on the east side. That would be in the east side on the whole side. In other words, it can't be, right? Remember, east and west is not Chol and Kodesh. Chol and Kodesh are north-south. We're on the north side. So if you go more north, you'll be outside. Less north, right? More south, you'll be inside. So east-west has nothing to do with it. The point is, he was on one side, he was on the other side. The question is, which were they? Northwest or southwest, or northeast or southeast in the room? So they say, if you say kula b'chol, you can't have the mizrach, the payas you can't have the payas there, because habi'inam b'veit Elohim nalech beragesh. We ended yesterday's stuff with this idea that we want hustle bustle. Where do we want it? Obviously in the Azara, not in an unsanctified area. We want to show that the temple is bustling with people and things going on. That's why we're doing the payasot. And vileka, if you do it in the unsanctified part, then it's not really considered part of the temple there. Elashma mina chetzia b'kodesh chetzia b'chol, so it must be half-half. Now, how do we get to the fact that there was an entrance on either side? You could get in from the outside, you get in from the inside. Let's say you assume the opening was to the Kodesh. Again, you'd have a problem. Zaken Yoshe b'ma'arava wouldn't work. If you have a chamber that's in the Azara even if it crosses the border into the chol, if the only way to get in is from the sanctified room, from the azara, then that whole thing is going to be kodesh, because it doesn't, even though technically it's over the border, it doesn't matter. The entrance is from here. It's obviously only, if it's only accessible from the inside, the whole thing is kodesh. And likewise, we're going to say the same with the reverse. You can't have the payas b'mizracha. The reverse is true also. If it's only open to the outside, to the unsanctified space, then the whole thing is chol, and then you can't have the payas anymore, because then again, you won't have the Beit Elohim nalech beragesh. So therefore, elalav shma mina shnei ptachim ayula, echad patuach b'kodesh ve'echad patuach l'chol. It must have had two entrances. Now we're moving to the next Mishnah. For this, if you look at the sheet, you'll have a good list of, we're going to talk about the payas hasheni, the second payas. There's 13 jobs, okay? And here we go. Mi shochet, who slaughters the animal. Mi zorek, I want you to notice there's activities between shchita and zrika. Remember, there's kabbalat adam, accepting the blood, and walking the blood to the altar. So we're going to have to figure out who does that. Mi v'dashen mizbeach hapnimi, umi v'dashen et menorah. Then they go in. We've already done the Truma Deshen on the big altar, but now someone goes inside to the Eichal. They do the cleaning of the inner altar where the Ketoret is, the incense, and right, they just pick up some of the ashes, take them out, and the cleaning out of the menorah. Those are 4 jobs. Then the 5th job, which is going to split up into 6 people, Mima ale varim lakevesh. So when we're done with the 6, we're going to have 10 jobs already here. What are the evarim lakevesh? Who's going to bring up the parts of the body of the animal of the korban tamid to, right? We're obviously talking here, by the way, about the korban tamid of the morning. Who's going to slaughter it? Who's going to sprinkle the blood? Then they clean the mizbeach and the menorah, and then, which are obviously not connected to the korban, then they're going to bring the parts up the ramp. So who brings them up? Well, we have number 1, the rosh and the regel, the head and the right hind leg. We're going to talk about this later, why they go together. Shtei yadayim, the 2 front legs. Okay, I'm also going to tell you that we're going to see 5 different opinions about the order here. Our Mishnah gives us 1 and references a second one, but we're going to see a bright at the end of today's daf with 4 different opinions that are all different from the one mentioned here. So shtei yadayim are the front legs. Ha'oketz v'haregel, the tail and the left hind leg that we haven't yet dealt with. Ha'chazeh v'hagera, the chest and the neck. Shtei adfanot, the 2 flanks of the animal. V'hakirbayim, the inside part. Those are the 6. So we got up to 10. Now we have the solet, the flour, the fine flour that they need for the mincha offering. The chavitin, right. So that means who's going to do the mincha offering? Who's going to do the chavitin is the mincha offering of the Kohen Gadol. Remember, he had to bring 2 a day. V'hayayin, okay, and the wine libations, which are those are the nisachim that go along with the korban tamid. So now, 13 kohanim zachubo. So 13 kohanim get these jobs. Amar ben Azar lefnei Rabbi Akiva mishum Rabbi Yeshua derech hilucho haya karev. They would bring it to the altar the way the animal walked. In other words, if you take an animal walking, which part goes first? We're going to go through the animal in that direction. Okay, so the head, then the neck, then the legs, then the front legs, then the body, then the back legs, and then the tail, right? So something along those lines. We'll see exactly when we get to the bright at the end of today's daf. Now the Gemara starts off with a good question. Okay, when you play a game, what do? You usually roll the dice or something for someone to go first. Whoever gets the highest number, they go first. Let's say you're playing with 5 people. So normally what do, right? It's very rare that you would go by whoever got the highest number after that person, right? You would normally, right? You wouldn't say, okay, you got a 5, you go first. You got a 2, you go second. You got a 1, you go third. We don't say that. We go, right? Usually clockwise, some people counterclockwise, whatever you might do, but you come up with an order. So that's how it works. The first person wins, and then everybody goes based on that. So that's exactly the Gemara's question. They ask the question, do they do just the first job? Whoever wins gets that first job. And then we go, let's say, to his right. The person to his right gets the second job. The person to his right gets the third job, and so on. Oh, or do we say, or do they do a separate lottery for each job? So the Gemara is going to bring, those structures going to be very simple. We're going to bring 3 attempts to answer the question. All 3, by the way, are going to suggest it's one avodah. We do a pious for one. And then from there, all the other people get the jobs based on where they're sitting, where they are. or standing, I should say, because we just learned that they don't sit. And except for the second one, where we're going to bring two different versions of it. We're going to first bring a version that it's to say avodah achat, only one, and then we're going to flip it and we're going to say, oh no, maybe that source was brought to prove the opposite. Okay, so we're going to have that one's going to split into two different versions of it. Okay, this is all, by the way. Okay, let me make it clear. I see from the question, there's 4 big payasot. For sure, then each time they do a lottery. The question is within each lottery, like right now we're on the second lottery, within each lottery, they divided up a number of jobs. So within the lottery, when they divide up the other jobs, was there one main lottery for that one? And then they give out the jobs accordingly. Or within each of the 4 payasot, were there multiple lotteries? That's the big question. Everyone agrees there's 4 big lotteries going on that we already discussed. So Tashma, let's learn from here. Arba payasot hayusham. There were 4 payasot, and this is exactly how they're going to start. So good you asked your question. It says there's 4. If you're going to say, right, we know there were 4 lotteries. Now, if you're going to say there were 4 lotteries, but each one had many lotteries within it, then it should have given us this total number of how many lotteries took place. To which the Gemara says, no, right? There's 4 times where you get together to do a lottery, 4 separate times in the day. And within each one, there were multiple lotteries. So that source doesn't prove anything. Let's move on. Tashma, next source. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, this is the one we're going to have 2 versions of it. Lo haya payas lamachta, ela kohen shezaka baktoret, omer lezeh she'imo zachemi b'machta. What does this mean? The ktoret, you would go into the inner, the person who did the ktoret goes into the inner, the hechal, and burns the ktoret on the altar there, right? He burns up the incense. With what does he burn it? There was no fire on there, like there was a fire on the main altar. In fact, there were 2 fires. There was a maracha gedola and there was a maracha ktana. The maracha ktana was specifically for this purpose. They would take coals from the small pile of wood. They would take from there, put it in a pan, kind of like on Yom Kippur, and then not obviously bring it into the Kodesh Kodeshim like on Yom Kippur, but they would bring it into the inner altar and they would burn up the incense. There wasn't a fire going all the time. So who gets to do that? So the Kohen that gets the Ktoret, but that's his job to do the Ktoret, he brings along whoever was next to him to do the pan, to bring the pan in. Okay, because there's 2 jobs, right? One is to burn the incense, the other is to bring in the pan. So they say, what do you see from here? That's if we see an example of how it was done, the main job gets lottery, is by lottery, and the next job is just the next guy next to him. So that must be, that's how they did it in general. To which the Gemara says, no, you could say, this is really one and the same job. And that's why he just gives it to someone next to him. But really, it's one and the same job, and it's done in that way, but it doesn't teach you anything about anyone else. Igid Amre, now we're going to have a bit of a mirror image of the sugya, which is the second reading of it. Some people say this was brought to say, from the beginning, this was taught here because it's only here it's done this way. But everything else, it must have been not done this way. And that's why we're being told specifically this time, the guy next to him gets it, but normally we do a pious for everything. But then they say, no. The reason why they said it specifically here and only here was to teach you specifically here, it's also done that way, because you might have thought not. Why not? And now we get back again to the religious fervor and desires of all the people in the temple. And now we're going to see maybe some of their motivations were not exactly pure. Number 1, it was a very uncommon thing, the Ktoret. Why was it uncommon? What do you mean? We did it twice every day. Once with the Tamid Shel Shachar, once the Tamid Shel Ben Harbayim. You say, no. But why is it not common? Because Ktoret is the one thing in the temple, you can bring a sacrifice voluntarily. You could bring libations. You could say, I want to give a wine libation on my own. You could just volunteer. But you can't volunteer to bring incense. There's no such thing. So therefore, it's not so common because it was only done twice a day, not more than that. Uma'atra. And it also was known, we're going to see this in tomorrow's daf, to make people wealthy. It's like a skula, you could say, right? You were supposed to get wealthy if you did this job. So now, because people knew they were going to get wealthy if they were involved in this, not kinlei payis b'fnei, we better make a new payis and not have it that it just goes to the guy next to him, because again, people are going to be fighting because everyone's going to want to do it. A very coveted job. So therefore, kamash malan, that's why it says it specifically here, but really it was true for everything. So in the end, We don't have a proof either which way from this source. But now we're going to have our third and final source, which, as usual, in these kind of sugyas, you say, why didn't they just bring this in the first place? Maybe they didn't know it. But let's read. Tashma, Detani, Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia brings a braita. Lo lechol avodah v'avodam b'faisim. Here he says it explicitly. They didn't do a separate lottery for each job. Ela kohen shezacha b'tamid, 12 achav kohanim nimshachim imo shma mina. Here you can obviously say, right? It says it there. They only did one. Whoever got the tamid, his people, the brothers sitting next to him, right? Not literally brothers, but his, right? The people sitting next to him would basically go with him. It would be him, and then everybody next to him would get the next job down the road, down the line. Payas hashini, ibailahu. Now they have the question that I mentioned before, which is mi mekabel, who does the accepting of the blood? Shochet mekabel, do we say it's the one who slaughtered? Why? Remember, we said there's a little bit of a trouble with this. The Kohen Gadol, remember, he has to slaughter, but he also can't fully slaughter because how are you going to catch the blood if you're also slaughtering? But it seems like you really could, and we'll see later that you really can. Okay, it's just not as easy, but you can. So maybe he's the one who accepts the blood. Why would you want to say that? Again, we're back to what the religious excitement is going to cause, maybe some problem. Agav chavivute, because he's so excited. If you got zrikat dam, I mean, that is the best job. That's how the atonement goes. That's the main thing in the temple, right? You might say, oh, gross blood and all that. But no, like that was it. That was the most important job in the temple. So you were so excited, maybe lo makabele l'kulei dam. If you're also accepting the blood, you're going to rush and not get all the blood, and you're going to run to sprinkle the blood on the altar before you've actually accepted all the blood. So we don't want you rushing through Kabbalah because you're so excited to do Zrika. Oh, Dilma, or maybe Zorek Mekabel. Maybe it's the one who sprinkles the blood who does the accepting of the blood. Why? Sometimes a non-Kohen can do the Shchita. And then you're going to be stuck because then you don't have someone to do the Kabbalah. So maybe it goes together with Zrika, which is only for Kohen. So Tashma, let's learn from here. Ben Katin, and there's a picture of this, he made 12 spigots on the Kior. The Kior was this big thing full of water, and there were 12 spigots around. Why 12? That way, the 12 people who are involved with the Korban Tamid that we just listed in our Mishnah, really we listed 13, but one doesn't need. Why? The Shochet doesn't need, because Shchita can be done by a Zal. Anything that can be done by a non-Kohen doesn't need your hands to be washed. Everyone else who's doing an avoda in the temple has to wash their hands. Only Shchita, because it can be done by someone who's a non-Kohen, that's not an activity that needs what we call Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim, washing your hands. That's something we saw the Kohen does 10 times on that day, right? Each time with each dunking, we're going to get to that. That's a separate. This is anyone who goes to do work in the temple has to wash their hands and feet. So if there's Isal Kadatach Shochet Mekabel, if the Shochet is also the one who does Kabbalat Adam, then that means the Kabbalah was done by a Kohen. That means an additional Kohen. We need 13 then. Tleisar Havu, it would be 13. It can't be there's another job that requires Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim. So we remove Shochet from the list in terms of the 13 people, because it doesn't need Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim, and the 12 spigots are for those people. Therefore, it must be the Zorek does Kabbalat Adam, otherwise we need 13. Shma mina. I'll bring you another proof. Shachata shochet v'kibel hamekabel ubalo lizrok. It says the shochet shechs. Then it says v'kibel hamekabel, and the mekabel comes in to get it. That's someone else, not the shochet. Ubalo lizrok, and he goes to sprinkle the blood. So there, it's very clear that the one who accepts the blood is the one who sprinkles it on the altar. And I guess we manage with the fact that we hope that he doesn't rush through and not collect all the blood. Amar ben Azad l'fnei Rabbi Akiva. Now we're getting to all our different opinions here about the order. Tano Rabbanan. So they bring a braita, and they specifically don't mention Tanakama here, which is a little bit of a question. We'll get back to that at the end. Ketzad derech hilucho. So what is this derech hilucho that was mentioned in our Mishnah that Ben Azai says? Harosh v'haregel. So again, we always start, everybody starts, you can see that from the chart, everybody starts with the head and the leg. Hachazeh v'hagera. So then we get to the neck and the chest. Shtei yadayim, the first two legs. Shtei dfanot, the flanks. Ha'oketz v'haregel, and then the tail and the back leg. Rabbi Yossi omer, derech hefsheto hayakarev. Each one has a different theory. Is it the way the animal walks? Is it the way you take the hide, you flay the hide of the animal? Now you would hang the animal upside down. to do that. So now we're going to start from the hind legs. So ketzad derech hefsheto, harosh v'aregel, again, that's not even a consideration in terms of that. That always goes first. Ha'oketz v'aregel, now we start from the end, the tail and the other hind leg. Shtei dfanot, the flanks. Shtei yadayim, the first, right, the front legs. Ha'chazeh v'agera, we're just going reverse order basically. Rabbi Akiva Omer, derech nitucho haya karev. It's the order of how you chop it up. Ketzad derech nitucho. So how do you chop it up? Because remember, first you do hefshet, take off you flay the hide, then you do nituach, then you chop it up into pieces, and once it's in pieces, you bring it to the altar. So it's a matter of which one is the one that the order of what do we determine? By the way, I'll stop here and just say, what you see here is, again, this whole idea of order in the temple, right? There might be a huge debate about what the order was and what the logic of the order was, but everybody agrees that there was order. You can't just bring parts of the body. No, there's an order and everything is very particularly set up in a particular manner. So we're going to see now what's derech nitucho. Harosh v'aregel, again, put that aside. Shtei yadayim, first you cut off the first two front legs. Hachazeh v'agera, then the chest and the neck. Then shtei dfanot, then the flanks. Then you take apart, right, that you kind of cut the side parts, right? Get rid of the legs, get rid of the top part. Then you're left with the body, shtei dfanot. Then you get to the oketz and the regel. Sorry, I skipped something. No, I read it wrong. Okay, sorry. Shtei yadayim, first the two front legs, hachazeh v'agera, shtei dfanot, then the flanks, then the oketz and the regel at the end. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, derech ilu yo haya karev. No, it goes by importance. Which part is more important? Ketzad derech ilu yo, what's that order? Harosh v'aregel, hachazeh v'agera, the chest and the neck is next in importance. Shtei dfanot, the two flanks. Ha'oketz v'aregel, then the tail and the hind leg, the left one, and shtei yadayim, and then the two front legs. That's the order of importance. To which the Gemara says, what do you mean? V'aktiv kol netach tov yarech bekatef. The best parts are the thigh and then the shoulder. Now there's two ways of reading it. I'll read it one way, which is first the thigh, then the shoulder. Now where's the thigh come here? It's the last thing. And the shoulder is part of the tfanot. That's earlier. And this pasuk seems to indicate the reverse. So they say, Hahi bekhusha. If it's not very fatty, then the leg is better because the leg has meat on it. If it's fatty, then the katef is more important, the flank, because that has it's very fatty area of the body. And because of that, that's more. It depends sort of what type of animal you have, a lean one or a fatty one. And that's how they resolve the contradiction. Now comes Rava, and the Meiri says the reason why Rava says this is because he's kind of bothered why wasn't Tanna Kama mentioned in this whole list. So he says, Bein Tana Didan ubein Rabbi Yossi, he really holds like Rabbi Yossi theoretically that Batar Iluya de Bisra Azlina, that it really goes by the important part first. But it's just a matter of Mar Azil Batar Ivra de Bisra, Umar Azil Batar Shamna de Bisra. One goes by the meat itself, and one goes by the fat. So therefore, the Tanna Kama starts with the Shtei Yadayim, the legs, because the legs are meaty, whereas the flank is not as meaty. So there's they each kind of, one goes by using lean meat, which the meat is more important, and one goes by the fats are more important. Okay, I don't know if it's lean or not. It's just a matter of which is more important. Is it the fat or is it the meat? So there we have derech iluyo kind of splits into two, which we all know everything's kind of subjective. It's a matter of what you prefer over somebody else. Okay, two last questions. My time asalka regel bahade resha. Why do you have the leg always with the head? Because the head has a lot of bones in it. It's very bony. So again, there's different explanations. I'll go with one, which is because it's so bony, there's not a lot of meat, and we want it to be the first one and significant. So therefore, cover regel bahadeh. So they bring the leg with it, and obviously the right, because the right is always more important. Now, everybody agrees that the head goes first. Minalan, where do they all get this from? The pader, we're going to talk about this more tomorrow. It's this fat that was found like in the inside of the intestine or around the intestines. It was like a covering over the intestines. The rosh and this fat would go the first of all the evarim, of all the parts. Where do we get it from? Talmud Lomar, et rosho ve'et pidro ve'arach. Okay, this is a verse. I'll read you the whole pasuk. V'natach oton le'netachav, he cuts them into pieces. Ve'et rosho ve'et pirdo ve'arach hakohen otam alaitzim. It only mentions the head and the padim. So that must mean that these are the most important and they go first. And then we already said, and once you have the rosh, well, the regel goes with it, And that's how we got to the Rosh and the Regel, according to everybody, goes first. Okay, so again, we saw here the importance of the order. Okay, order in the temple, that's really our main thing here. It's just a debate about what really the order is. And again, we see a situation where they obviously did it in a particular way. We just don't know anymore what the way was, and we have different theories about what the order was. Okay, have a good day, everybody.